Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the Summoner's Rift Zamboni. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another week of the podcast. We've got a good bit ahead of us today. We've got some different motorsports news, some conversations there, a little bit of Formula One, and some just quick hitter notes. League of Legends, the LPL started, and then, of course, some Magic the Gathering to wind it all down at the end. Justin, it's good to see you for another week, man. How's it going?
Yeah, good to see you too. It's going pretty well. Do you think they use a Zamboni to clean up all the dead minions after these games?
So I don't think so. I think it's like, okay, so Colleen and I had this conversation. I think it can relate. Not specifically about minions on Summoner's Rift, but we obviously, since we moved to our new place in the summer, have been going on walking through the cemetery across the street. We've talked about it. It's a nice time. We took Senna on a walk there this morning. In the summertime, it is just covered in lantern flies, like many places in the East Atlantic area, whatever you would call our area. Can't find a goddamn carcass of one of those bugs anywhere right now. There's millions of them, probably billions, that have died, been squished, everything. I don't know. Where do all the carcasses go? Do they just get washed away by the rain? Do other bugs eat the carcasses? Do they decompose that fast? I don't know. But it's probably a similar situation, whatever the true answer is on the Rift there. Interesting
take. So do you think there's some kind of ecosystem there where the minions are being eaten by vulture-like creatures?
Or just maybe not vulture-like creatures, but I mean, Baron's got to eat, man.
Sure, no, very true. Maybe they just pack them all up on a cart and just fucking feed them to the Baron and the dragons.
They get washed it down the river and snack. Scuttle snack.
Scuttle snack.
Scuttle's got to eat too. So.
There you go. Wow. The cleaning processes of Summoner's Rift being broken down. It's good to be back for another week here, Aaron. Why don't you hit me with your Rose, Thorn, and Seed here for the week, and let's get into it.
Cool. So I will start with my Thorn this week, which I've been having some anxiety and whatnot that I haven't really had in a while. I think part of it maybe that I've just had some additional stress at work that I had kind of talked about last week, but also I've been kind of bad and haven't had a therapy session in a couple months now. So because I was doing pretty well, one of my sessions I ended up having to I had to cancel because it just scheduling conflict came up, and I just never ended up rescheduling because life just got busy and I forgot, and I've been meaning to, but probably is part of it. But yeah, it's just it's been stressful, and today I was like stressing all morning because we had to leave Senna home alone for the first time for like a full day, and so we had hired a dog walker. She had come over, we met her, like she's great, which is actually my Rose that went super well. She came by, she was like super just communicative about what was going on, asking questions, and also it was nice to see that worked out well. But Senna did not take too kindly to being home alone for a bit. Today we've left her home before for some time, but I don't know what it was today. She was barking, setting off the Furbo notifications on my phone every 3-4 minutes that she was barking or crying or whatever. And that just like stressed me out all morning. I'm sitting there like, oh my God, like every time there was a notification on my phone, I'm like, checking to make sure she's not like dying or like caught herself up in the crate, or I don't even know. I just didn't know what to expect. So that stressed me out. But like I said, my Rose, the dog walker, came, played with her, took her outside. Like it went well. So that eases at least like my mind on that she'll be fine. She just hopefully will get a little more accustomed to having some alone time a couple days a week. So
Yeah, it's a tough little learning process there for the pup, though, But eventually, they learn that you do come back. It's part of the process, part of the routine.
yeah,
But yeah, it's a tough little learning curve there.
Yeah, every time I come home from work, it's like she thought I died and was never coming back, and I'm like, nope, still here. And she gets super pumped, so that's always a nice greeting. But
that's good.
But yeah, that is my Thorn and Rose. My seed for this week is that Colleen and I booked a trip over my birthday weekend out to Colorado. So I'm just looking forward to doing that. It should be a nice time. I'll get to meet her, one of her good friends, and her fiance, and get to explore somewhere I haven't been. So looking forward to that.
Hell yeah, that's really neat. I've never been to Colorado. I don't believe. Now, do you think you'll do any any mountaineering, any skiing, snowboarding?
Probably not skiing or snowboarding. Depending on weather, we could probably find some neat places to hike. I definitely want to go see Red Rocks, whether for a show or not, just to kind of check that out, since Colleen's been out to a number of shows out there.
Nice.
And it looks just really pretty awesome. So we've got some stuff on the agenda, but I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
Very cool. Very cool.
But enough about me. How's your week been? Let's hear about your Rose, Thorn, and Seed.
Yeah, going pretty well, man. So my Rose here for the week, we were playing Guardians of Atlantis over the weekend on Sunday. We had a short little session to learn the game. So it's basically like a tabletop MOBA game that tries to simulate the elements of like that 3-lane hero v hero with minion combat. And yeah, it was pretty neat. I guess they've improved upon elements from the first one. None of us were familiar with it before. I think some people had watched like a YouTube video just like get a sense of the rules, but all of us were coming in pretty green. We had 6 players. We did like a little 3v3 thing. So it was pretty fun. I don't know if I would choose the champ that I played again. There was like a default, not like default, but like tutorial mode game that it like sets up for you, recommends like these 3 heroes should be on this team, these 3 heroes should be on this team, and it's like the, I guess, just like balanced team comps or whatever. And so we played that, and that's cool. I liked a lot of the rules, a lot of the mechanics seemed pretty neat. But yeah, I'm not sure I would play my character again. I would like to see what other avenues are available, because I guess there's a bunch of other champs in the box. So I think it'd just be neat to explore other avenues and just learn about the game. We only got one in the time that we had, but overall, I think it was a pretty fun game, and I think it'd be sweet to go back to.
Nice. What was it in particular about your character that you're like, I don't know if I'll do that again?
It was a supportive character, and
you're the carry. I know.
Well, it just seems like those are higher skill cap
Gotcha.
champions, where you would want to like understand opponent heroes better and have a little bit more of a mind for the strategy of what might go on, because my hero was like disruption and movement and like crowd control.
Gotcha.
And so I was not being that effective, you could say. So I would just want to try like a different element or different like play style just to learn about the games. Not saying that my hero was bad. I just wasn't playing it optimally, and I could see like, oh, there's layers here that I'm just not like operating on.
Gotcha.
But obviously it's the first time I'm playing this thing. But it was a fun game. I like the aesthetic. It was it was just an overall good time. So that was my rose here for the week. My thorn is more of a kind of like problem solved, moving up the ladder here. So I had a little bit of Sarah and I with the business had a little bit of a scheduling conflict going into this week. And again, instead of like really getting frustrated about it, really being maybe making a poor decision or even just like being avoidant with it, when we did have the meeting, I was able to just kind of raise my concerns about what happened in just kind of like an even mannered tone. And I think we like were able to come to an agreement where I think previously I probably just like would have let it slide, may have like got my head a little bit like, oh, I don't know how to bring this up, I don't want to make them feel bad, blah 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 blah, and then just like end up not saying anything and then just like living with an issue. But I spoke my piece, and I think we're going to be better off for it. So we turned a scheduling conflict into understanding each other a little bit better. So I thought that was sweet.
Nice, and always room for growth because you guys. I mean, obviously you're partners in life, but also business partners. So I can understand how that can be kind of like tough to approach because you're looking at it and you don't want to necessarily rock the home life boat because you wanna...
me and Sarah didn't have a disagreement.
Oh,
it
wasn't
was
with you and Sarah. Oh,
me and her as
gotcha.
The business
Okay.
had a disagreement with like another entity that we were having a meeting with.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah, not like disagreement, just like things didn't line up the way we thought they did, so we had to like hash that out and see like why did that happen.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, in that case too, it's definitely good to be able to just like approach the topic comfortably and also because it's not the easiest thing to do. So
that went really well. So very pleased about that. And then my seed here is I'm realizing I'm getting way less steps during the day for obvious reasons. And so I think I'm going to have to add some kind of like cardio, like very intentionally into my day to try and get some of my steps in. I'm realizing that is something big lacking. So I'm going to work into the future on adding that in here. But that's my rose thorn and seed here for the week. Let's get into some of those. What'd you call them? Quick shots? Hot shots? Quick bites?
Quick hitters?
Quick hits. Quick hitters. Hell yeah.
So starting off just in motorsport news, of course I've been longing for F1. It is not back yet, but Formula E did have their first race just this past week. So they had the Mexico City Grand Prix. I believe it's at the same circuit that they do the Mexican Grand Prix for Formula One. But they have a new generation of cars that they're using. They look pretty futuristic. And so one thing that I'm looking to do, and I'll link you this picture, tweet with pictures of the cars, but I want to do a little more research into like Formula E and see kind of the differences in cars. I think it's more similar to IndyCar in terms of the chassis and whatnot being like more similar, but I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure. It might be the same as F1, but that's looking at the cars. That's one thing that I want to definitely like look into more because it was pretty intriguing. It was good racing. There were a few names that I was that I recognized in the lineup, including the guy who finished P2, which was Pascal Wehrlein, who used to be a driver in Formula One, and it popped up and was very recognizable for me because I've been rewatching the 2016 F1 season where he drives for Manor Racing, who was in Formula One at the time. So it was interesting seeing that name because he was kind of just a midfield driver. And so seeing him up at the top or towards the top of the Formula E race was cool. And then, of course, there was Stoffel Van Dorn, Jean-Eric Verne, two Formula One guys, and Dan Ticktum, who used to be an F2 driver who was over there driving in Formula E as well. So
Gotcha. Now, who's Dan Ticktum racing for?
So he is racing for Neo 333. He previously was a Red Bull Junior driver
Yep.
when he was coming up through F3 and F2. So I don't know. I don't think Neo has any sort of association. I doubt he's still in the like Red Bull program at this point. But it was a recognizable name. But really, the rest of the grid was all people who I really wasn't familiar with. So
Gotcha.
It's interesting as well. I'm kind of curious as I do a little more research and whatnot to try and figure out like maybe what some of the paths up to this were. Is it Formula 2 and Formula 3 guys that I just was not familiar with? Are we getting IndyCar guys? Like where, like I'm curious to see kind of where some of these guys have come up through to Formula E here.
Right, like is there a full electric like juniors and like karting thing?
I can't imagine there is, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the top level of karting for people who don't go into single seater racing in like Formula 3 or GP3 or any of those, that maybe there is a path, that an alternative path that can kind of lead you to still racing professionally. But it piqued some curiosity. It put some questions in my mind, and so I think I'll kind of keep a like side eye to Formula E throughout the season, just if it comes up on my radar and whatnot, to check it out and see how it is. Because like I said, the racing was pretty good. It was a little different, but still a pretty cool race to see.
Nice, yeah, because if I remember, some of the criticisms about it mainly were like the power package, where they didn't have enough energy, and I believe this was probably in the maiden year and maybe last year as well, and likely not as much last year. I'm probably just remembering the maiden year, where a couple of the races, the distance was like a little too long. They didn't have enough to end up finishing races, or there was some kind of like power issues overall that kind of hampered maybe the overall quality of some of the races. But was that, I can't imagine any of that was present this year.
So far, surprisingly, there was because I mean it's a new generation of cars. It's a lot of changes with things. So there's always the expectation, just like at the beginning of this previous Formula One season, that there's going to be some reliability issues and whatnot. And there really weren't any big issues in terms of that. There were only 4 DNFs out of 22 cars, so not too bad. And I believe most of them were more like contact and those kind of issues, as opposed to running into like reliability stuff. But it didn't have many of those issues that you would kind of expect initially. The attack mode and some of the other like changes that they've made, which is essentially their like DRS, was kind of interesting. I don't fully understand how all of it works yet, just watching through one race, but there's lots to check out, lots to learn, and so I'm excited to check it out a bit more.
Sure. Let me just ask one more question about the race. How did they do pit stops?
So they still pit for like tires and things like that.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's still
But
like
there's no like fast charge system that they need to like get the battery up, or they just
not
make
as
sure it can
the
go the whole way.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's all just like go the
Whoa.
distance.
Okay.
I don't think there is a any sort of quick charge from what I saw at least. So
Gotcha. Okay. Neato.
yeah, so it's definitely something I want to keep an eye on and check out a bit more. Um, but talking about other kind of motorsports news, there was the virtual LeMans 24-hour race on iRacing, and I had like added it to my
Not on
notes.
iRacing.
It was that's right. It was
It's
iRacing
R Factor
hosted a
2.
iRacing hosted a open like Le Mans like right after it. So
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
My bad.
I no, I was reading some articles. I think I just might have gotten that mixed up a little bit. So but I did see there were some Max Verstappen comments and tweets going out, and I wanted to get into it with you and talk it through, and then you hit me up about it, and so I'll let you take the lead. I'm curious what your thoughts are and where you want to start with it.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that R Factor 2 was a game that was released in, I think it's 2014, 2012. Initial release date is March 28th, 2013. So this is a game that's 10 years old, and based on I had I had checked out some experts in the sim racing field to see what they had to say about it, and from multiple points of view, what I understand is that it's a game that is just filled with, like they like to say for League of Legends, just spaghetti code, where they've just been like band-aiding and patching and just like building things on top of just like a faulty system, but never really doing maybe like a full necessary overhaul, or just saying, you know what, like just release a new game and whatever. So one of the main problems is that this game is just like really, really buggy and likely not stable enough to be used as the vehicle for a large tournament, or not tournament, but
Oh, a
like
large
large
event,
events
yeah.
such as, you know, this virtual 24-hour of Le Mans. On top of that, being that it's old and not well built, is the issues of like cybersecurity, and that is a big element of like what happened in the race. So you have the combination of this old game never being updated for basically like modern esports, and then the cybersecurity of the game not being up to, again, like modern esports standards. So first of all, the race is marred with a few just random disconnects from a couple of drivers, placing them in positions where they're like losing laps, and also then the race stewards like not giving those laps back in a very, what would the word be, gracious manner. They were saying like, we can give you all like one back, but overall we can't just be handing laps back for things out of our control if the server's disconnecting. So that's a big problem. And then later on into the race, there's a so this causes red flags where they just like stop the race. Everybody's done. There's what are called DDoS attacks on the server that the event was being hosted on, where large amounts of, what would you say, actors look to rush the server, overload it with, bandwidth and data, and just crash it. So that happens during this event. They have the red flag. They have the commentators just just buying time and yada yada yada. So it's like it's looking really rough. They get it back. They move the whole race onto another server. They set up a whole nother, little infrastructure thing. And then it just continues to be marred with DCs. You have drivers who are at the front doing really well, really popular names like Max Verstappen, just getting pretty frustrated on their own streams of the game, and not faring too well. So I think a lot of things going on for the event, but overall not a good look for this esports event.
Yeah, and on top of that, there was a entry fee that was charged to. From the article I read, it was in the four figures, so it was at least $1,000 that teams were. So it was invite only. Teams had to pay at least $1,000 to register and as an entry fee or whatever. And then this is the kind of issues that they're running into. Like, I completely understand the frustration and all. And also, like, I saw a lot of, and obviously there's a lot of Max haters out there on the internet. I saw a lot of people that were just, like, going at him for being, like, so upset and, like, about an esport racing thing and all. And it just, like, it hit me again, and I mean, obviously we've been seeing this with League of Legends and stuff for over a decade now. Like, I remember when I was first getting into League of Legends, seeing like morning TV hosts in America being like, and there's this crazy video game that sold out the Staples Center in 3 hours. What's up with that? Who wants to watch this stuff? And it's like, this is something that, like, you, at this point in, like, time, it's crazy to me that people are, like, still being like, well, it's just a esport, it's just a virtual race, it's not a real blah, 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 when there are literally professional F1 esports drivers who get paid money by teams. They're, like, esports is a professional thing. Yes, you don't make the kind of money you do in a professional sport. A professional F1 esport driver is not making the same as Max or Lewis or whoever else on the F1 grid, but it's still a viable, like, career option. And it just blows my mind to see all these people, and maybe it's just because it was Max that they were like, he had a temper tantrum. All the headlines are, oh, Max rage quits LeMans. And I'm like, I mean, I guess it is technically a rage quit, but I think they made it sound like he was being a big old bitch about it, as opposed to, like, the whole thing was fucked up on the organization's side that put it together. Yeah. Like,
and if I understand, I think he was disconnected like up to 3 times throughout the race, and then on the third one he just decided to retire the car and just like not waste his time.
Yeah.
So like that to me is fine. It's
not like he just quit immediately or anything and was like,
yeah, he put 18 hours in.
Yeah, he put a ton of time. He was in first place at different points in the race. Like, he was doing well, and then he disconnects and comes back in P17 a lap and a half down. And it's like, well, yeah, at that point, like, what is the point if they're not giving laps back and whatnot for these server issues that are on them? Like,
right.
I think that it is a bit ridiculous. And also, like, he talks about it in his statement, but he had been putting in months of prep for this race and everything. Like, he had been really, and I think along with that, Max he's been outspoken about being very passionate about these endurance races and all. Like, I think he is very, he has a good mindset for it, clearly, to be able to go for that long driving and everything. And whether it's a sim or a real car, like, you have to have some sort of ridiculous mental stamina to be going through and lapping again and again and again and hitting those
Mm-hmm.
times and all, and like have the awareness to kind of keep up with that. So it's clearly like something he's passionate about. So I think it is very understandable to be as frustrated as he was at the situation. He wasted his time, he wasted his money. Like, that feels bad.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and especially like you're put in the position where you have so much more to lose than the like maybe the org does, the org being like the people who put on the event, where there's this sense of um his sim racing expectations clearly were not up to what the standards of that game and that event were going to be. So it's kind of a mismatch. And then like he gets frustrated at that. And like, so who's going to lose more reputation in this sense? Are they going to look and say like, we're not doing that on our factor again. We gotta blah, blah, blah. This should, the host of the event is just ousted or whatever it is. It seems like most of the shade is being thrown towards the drivers that got frustrated as opposed to the esports organizers who should be focused on like hosting a great event.
Well, and I don't know if this is the case, but in his statement that he put out, he referred to it as the LeMans organization. So I don't know
Oh,
if
okay.
it. So from that, and I'd have to fact check myself, but if it is hosted by the same people who do the 24 hours of Le Mans at like the real driving one, then
Mm-hmm.
that's ridiculous. That if they, I understand that like maybe delving into the esports side of things is it's obviously going to be different and shift some of the things you have to figure out and learn, but that is a professional company that should be seriously vetting like how they're doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So I
agree.
think the expectation on them should be high, and for it to fall apart that poorly, I don't blame him. He said he's never going to compete in that race again, and it's because of their own incompetence. So, I mean, it's pretty harsh, but it's pretty true as well. I think if people are going to put that much time and effort and training and money and whatever else into it, then they deserve to have the expectation that things are going to be properly set up, properly run, and properly managed. Like, it just makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Like,
I would not like fault him or other drivers if they do feel that way and don't return to an event like that. Because yeah, like you said, that's really frustrating.
yeah. But I think I was also just frustrated with like the the way that it was portrayed. Like, even on WTF one's little mini article that they wrote, they said he sat with his arms crossed, resembling a toddler being told no. And it's like, no, that's just. Sorry for the doorbell, but I feel like that is so just like so much kind of like derogatory shit just targeted at him for being frustrated for driving for 18 hours and dealing with all that bullshit, server swaps, DDoS attacks, disconnections from not just him but a number of people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a poorly run event. If that happened in
Mm-hmm.
any other professional esport, I mean, everyone would be saying the same.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting thing to kind of go on. I think it would have been great to actually see it play out, and maybe we'll get opportunities to see future sim events like that hosted by different organizations or whatnot that maybe Max will participate in. But I wish we could have seen just like how it actually would have turned out without all the hiccups. So
Yeah, I think if they really wanted to kind of do it justice, similar to like a Riot or an ESL or something like this, they would likely have to use a more modern game,
Do
and
it on
really,
LAN.
yeah, or something, because that's really tough, and like especially in a world where there are events being held where they're, phoning in players from across the world and not really having that many issues and blah 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 blah. There's just other orgs like doing it really well, and that's just like, oh man, are we still like here? Are we really still here? That's a shame.
Yeah,
So yeah, I wouldn't fault anybody for not being interested in something like that.
yeah, and yeah, that was kind of my same like thought process on the quality of the race as well as like the reactions from people was like we're still here, like
Hmm.
this is where this is the state of things in 2022. Come on. um but moving right along into some Formula One and kind of our main motorsport we talk about. There were some announcements with more launch dates. So we have 8 of the 10 teams with launch dates announced. Red Bull is currently the first on the list, which actually surprised me a little bit. I feel like usually the teams that do their announcements first are maybe some of the teams that are a little lower on the grid that are trying to kind of get some energy behind their teams and whatnot,
Okay.
and not be like staggered in the middle of things. I think like Williams was pretty early on in past couple years and whatnot, and has done some like the I think last I forget if it was last year or the year before that Williams had their app that they were gonna do their launch on that crashed and all. And so like teams do really look to kind of get some hype and excitement from these announcements and car reveals and everything. They're like hour-long events with the drivers a lot of times answering questions and talking about the cars and the team and whatnot. So I was surprised to see Red Bull going and taking that early slot on the calendar. But of course, at the same time, last year they did their announcement and their car for the actual debut was nothing. There had a lot of differences from the car they showed during the announcement. So maybe it's a ruse of sorts to throw people off the trail.
I mean, is that really a ruse, or is that just like a part of like the developmental path of the
Oh,
vehicle
it
where
was
it's like,
probably yeah, it was probably just the development.
and a lot of it is showing off the livery, just showing off like the overall styling of the new vehicle. Obviously, like the new wings are on there. Any of the new like spoiler spoiler elements are similar,
Yeah.
like all these things. So yeah, just because all the sticky uppy bits weren't in all of the exact same places that they were on the reveal, I think is just like zooming in a little too much. It's like,
Oh,
dude, all right,
100%.
homie. Like it's effectively just like a show. It's almost like a fashion show for the drivers and the car and the team in general. They're just
Right.
putting on this like little display. It's like a PowerPoint for like a motorsport team. I don't know.
It's like E3.
Um yeah, I don't think you should look at that and be like, this is the expected product. If it's not how it looks now at Bahrain, I'm gonna be upset.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't think you should feel that way at all.
No, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's interesting seeing getting to see the new liveries and everything
Hmm.
that teams come out with. We still are waiting on Alfa Romeo and Haas to announce their launch dates and everything. But talking about the liveries, there's oh,
I
go
was just
ahead.
thinking about that. We're like So these are the announcements for the launch date. This isn't the launch. They're
Well,
announcing when they're gonna do the
well,
launch.
no.
And
These
this in
are
and
the
of
launch
itself
dates.
is
I am announcing that there was an announcement of the launch dates. Yeah,
right.
yeah, we're getting
Hell yeah.
into the weeds. But no, it starts February 3rd. I'm just excited for Formula One to be back. So
Oh
like
yeah. Oh yeah.
the sooner the better. But talking about some of the liveries, what did you think? What are you a fan of McLaren's like retro livery that they have done with the like light blue and orange and everything?
Yeah, I to be fair, I really like that color combo, orange and blue. I think it looks pretty cool. I also enjoyed how they incorporated, like we had talked about, the Google Chrome wheels, like having
Mm,
splashes of multicolor on their vehicle. Um,
yeah,
yeah, to be fair, I kind of just enjoy them in general, but also I'm not so hyped on them either. It's just
mm,
paint on a car,
yeah.
effectively.
Well, I was gonna
But
say if you really love the McLaren retro one, that's too damn bad because their partnership with Gulf Petroleum or Gulf Oil ended at the end of this last season. And Williams is actually set to potentially take them Gulf on as a sponsor. So I don't think we'll get the cool retro light blue and orange McLaren cars that we've gotten to see the past couple years at some of the different races. But we may end up with a cool Williams livery with them there, or just a nice little sponsorship sticker slapped on the side. So either way.
right. Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't help you get there at all. If anything, I was steering you further and further away
It's all
from that
right.
talking point.
I brought it back, so it's
Nice. Well
all
done.
good.
Well
But
done. I was straying into the forest right there.
yeah, well, and so I think it's so from what I understand, with Logan Sargent coming on
Yes.
and Golf being an American company, it's a sponsorship opportunity that they like. So
Oh.
it sounds like it might be a good fit, and it kind of speaks to, like we've
Damn.
talked about, the American audience and everything, that they say see an American F1 driver and they're like, oh, that seems like it could be a good place for us to fit in. So
Right.
hasn't officially been announced yet. This was just something that was rumored over the past couple of days. So we'll wait to officially see, but definitely an interesting one, because that is obviously a big sponsorship that could help to give some more financial backing and all to a company like Williams, who I wouldn't imagine has been at like the top of the cost cap in terms of spending. I would imagine
Likely
they're a
not.
bit lower, so that could be a nice little boost to their finances there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that's interesting when these like big title sponsors are shifting around and moving teams. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point there, Detective Batman, about the American company, American driver, American combo there. That's pretty good.
It's a bunch of research from other articles and whatnot, so I can't say I sleuthed it out all on my own, but found it for this podcast.
Hell
But
yeah.
another team that expects to actually be at the top of the cost cap this coming year is Haas. So get on the Steiner boat, Steiner ship. I forget what they called it the other year when they were in that IKEA catalog, but either way, Gunter and the Haas team are expecting to be a bit more competitive, having some more financial backing now to be able to be at that cost cap. So being able to develop more, and they had a lot of moments of being competitive in the midfield this past season. It wasn't every race, but they had a pretty good shake throughout the season. And I think with that boost, we could see a bit more fighting maybe towards that Alpine, McLaren kind of level that we saw from this past year.
Yeah, that pole position was super interesting as far as like the trajectory of the Haas team. That was a massive peak for them last year and likely turned a lot of heads and got a lot of eyes in their direction. So I'm like really excited for what their 2023 lineup can do. Cause yeah, that height of excitement last year for the Haas team really just has you wondering like, oh wow, like what can we actually do here if
Right.
they what am I trying to say, are able to put more money under their cars.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Gunter said it will be about how talented you are, not about how much money you have,
Yeah.
which I think is the goal of the cost cap, and I think it's something that we're
Mm-hmm.
maybe seeing with these regulations that I don't know, maybe teams aren't at the top aren't needing as much in terms of sponsorship, so some of that money is probably getting spread around a bit more to some of the other teams
Mm-hmm.
that maybe do need it a bit more, and that can level the playing field. So maybe over this coming season, the following season, that could kind of bring up the level of competition or raise the floor of the F1 grid.
There you go. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't necessarily shift the ceiling, I think the ceiling's at a pretty good level right now. So
Yeah, no, but like you said, if you're bringing the floor up, that is another interesting angle to increase competition instead of thinking like, well, what are the ways that we have to like slow the top teams down? Thinking of how can we, or teams thinking of how they can speed themselves up is interesting as well.
yeah, and so hopefully that is that ends up being what happens. Of course, that does come down to the engineering and the development and all as well.
Right.
But it's, I think, an exciting thing to see because I think a lot of fans and just a lot of like people who have watched F1 kind of follow it in general um, get kind of bored seeing the same teams at the top year after year after
Mm-hmm.
year. Like it's
Yeah.
exciting to see uh, someone who's an underdog work their way up and everything. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Haas does this year. We've got a shift of leadership at Williams as well. So Williams took on James Voles, who was the chief strategist for Mercedes for the past few years. So he was with British American Racing, Honda Racing, and then Braun GP, and since then has been with Mercedes. So he is going to be taking on the position as team principal over at Williams. So I think a pretty big move for Williams. Obviously, Mercedes has had some pretty solid strategic development, strategic planning, and so hopefully James can bring some of that to Williams and kind of help to lift them on that level as well.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy having such a powerful font of knowledge coming to a position of power in a team like that. The advantage to be gained from something like that for Williams is just like that. You probably can't even put into words what kind of boost that could be. Not saying that it would be. Not saying that whoever was there previously is like poor or like bad at their job or whatever, but you just look at an organization like the Mercedes F1 team that was just like being so dominant for so long. It's like this guy clearly knows something about what it is to win and can maybe shed a little light on that for the Williams organization. Not saying that they don't know how to win. They come from a long history of winning in Formula One, but it's something that they need to find maybe here in the modern age. So hopefully that's a big boon for their organization, because that would further go to your point of just like raising the floor up.
Yeah.
If you have individuals like being able to lift a team like that.
Yeah, and also in the aspect of he was with Mercedes from their early on years in Formula One since 2010, and
Gotcha.
they had to kind of build and develop and get to the level that they were at in 20, what I guess it was 2014 when they started winning, or 2014 I think, when they started winning their constructors run. And so with that, he kind of got to see that change in leadership, which Williams obviously recently went through with the Williams family selling off the team to some different owners in, I think it was a like venture capitalist group in the US. But I think that he brings some of that knowledge as well, that maybe that transition, he can help some of the pieces that didn't quite fall into place as well, if there's anything behind the scenes that still needs to kind of be brought together. So I think it's an exciting pickup for Williams, for their organization, and so I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what that ends up looking like for this coming year.
Yeah, overall, I think it's just going to be a big boom. But you're right; only time will tell. Yeah, we'll look forward to see what James Voles can do in 2023 for Williams here.
Yeah, and so just I'll kind of breeze through some of these other quick hitters, but
Yeah, go for it.
F1 Chinese Grand Prix that was canceled for 2023 was not replaced on the calendar, unfortunately. So we will have a 23 race season again. And with that, there's actually going to be a huge 28-day gap. So 4 weeks of no F1 between the Australian Grand Prix and the Baku Grand Prix, with that Chinese Grand Prix taken out. So that's going to be a little F1 drought later on in the year. But unfortunately couldn't replace that Grand Prix with another opportunity for another track.
I'm okay with that. I'm thinking that 24 is the upper limit of what the drivers would be wanting to do. So I'm happy that there's going to be only 23.
Yeah. Well, and last year it was the Russian Grand Prix that was taken out, that put it at 23 as well.
I believe so.
So,
or no, they did 22 last year.
Okay, so it was 23. So one more this year, and I agree. I think we're kind of moving towards that cap of what is reasonable for the drivers. So
and the orgs and all of the moving parts involved. But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, go ahead, continue.
Yep. And so just some other team news. So McLaren came out, and I don't know specifically who it was, but in an interview, so it was Andreas Stella with McLaren said that they're not concerned about Oscar Piastri running into the same issues that Daniel Ricciardo had. They said, we're adamant that he will have enough talent, process, and intelligence to find his own way, which I don't know what that says about Danny Ricks. I feel like that's a bit of a jab at him, as much as it is a statement to their confidence in their signing of Oscar Piastri. But I read that and I'm like, oh, that's not the most shining commendation for Daniel Ricciardo. But I guess we'll wait and see. I think it was interesting to see that they have such high expectations for Piastri as a rookie driver coming in. There's still a very steep learning curve. Even though he's been around some of the teams for a bit now, there's still a lot that he is going to have to adjust to and everything. So I will say I don't have the same expectations that McLaren has for him, if that's their at least first season expectations for him, because I think I am expecting him to have a rookie season similar to Mick Schumacher and Zhou Guanyu, where there's a lot of learning, there's some inconsistency in terms of performance, there's some just growth that we'll probably see throughout the season. And so I'm glad that they're putting their full support behind him, but I think that that might be a little, if they are just looking at the first year, might be a little bit lofty of an expectation.
Well, they do have a pretty decent vehicle, or at least they had a pretty decent vehicle in 2022. It just didn't seem like he was able to, figure out the drive. So that could be one of the like X factors for him that helps him have maybe an above average rookie season. Zhou Guanyu and like Yuki Tsunoda, they were coming into like midfield teams, or like even kind of back of the grid teams without like a really sharp sword. So maybe the McLaren package is a little bit better, but yeah, overall I would tend to agree. And not saying that they were like overly stellar either. I just think of them as maybe having a little more advantage over some of the other teams that have had
Definitely.
recent rookies.
Yeah, I mean there was a big gap between McLaren down to from 5th place to 6th place at Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin. So I would agree. I expect them to give him the opportunity for a better performance, but
that's all I'm saying. Just an X factor, not like well, sir, think about this angle here.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that he's starting off in a better position, and it's something that we haven't seen a ton of, really. Like, I mean, we've talked about it that there's not too many drivers who have gotten their first drive in a car that is competing towards the top of the grid. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is one that came into McLaren right off the bat, winning in his first season and everything. And so there's a lot of generally drivers come into teams that are lower in the grid and either help bring that team up if they're really successful, or dump that team and go to one that is successful. So it's it'll be interesting to maybe be able to compare between how Piastri ends up doing this coming year and some of the recent rookies and their performances that that we've gotten to see. So
yeah, there you go.
So that's one thing to look at. Another interview article that came out was with George Russell. So he was discussing his first year with Mercedes and kind of spoke to how at Williams he was a new driver to F1 who was also kind of having to be a team leader in terms of their team and everything, with both performance and just like trying to figure things out and help, because obviously the drivers have to give this feedback and everything to the engineers to be able to help with the development and making the car better to drive. So I think like from his perspective, he said that a year getting to learn underneath Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes is worth a number of years anywhere else. He kind of spoke highly to being able to experience a season with a seasoned vet and everything, and grow and have that input coming kind of side by side, as opposed to him trying to just figure it out and help as much as he can, like he was with Williams. So a pretty interesting like thought as well. So looking at some of these younger driver pairings, like we'll have with De Vries and Sonoda over at AlphaTauri, I think there is that's something I hadn't really thought about as much in terms of like helping with the development and the growth of the team as a whole. So I mean, Haas, when they had Mick and Nikita Mazepin, that had to be, obviously we knew it was going to be rough because of two rookie drivers coming into a team that was not putting a lot of development into the car, but they also didn't really have the ability to get as quality of feedback, because the drivers they had to help the development like just didn't have the experience that could have potentially helped to at least propel things a little bit more in the right direction, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great point, where because of the because of how new they were, they didn't know what they didn't know to be able to help develop the car. That's a great point.
Yeah, so I think that is definitely interesting. Just as a side note to keep an eye on for some of the cars that do have some younger drivers. It also, with Haas, like we said, going and saying they're going to be able to spend up to the cost cap in terms of their development, their finances, and everything. Having the two veteran drivers there of Hulkenberg and Magnussen this coming season could give them a pretty good opportunity to maybe find a few places up the constructors standings for this coming season. So
yeah, for sure.
Then just some last couple things. So Mercedes apparently has offered Lewis Hamilton a 62 million euro contract that would bump up from his 40 million euro contract from this past year. I guess that would be a 2-year contract at 62 million euros per year. So I'd say that number probably will entice him to... I don't think he was thinking about leaving that much, but I'm sure it's always in the back of his mind after how long he's been in F1. But that number could entice most people to do it for a little bit longer.
Dude, I mean, I hope that, like, I see that as like, damn, my man's like whole family for generations could be set up.
Oh,
like,
and
that's
he's like
sick.
He's investing as well into things like
yeah.
He's bought part of the Denver Broncos NFL team, which obviously, like, the NFL has been around for a very long time. That is going to continue being around for a very long time. So like that's a investment that I'm sure will grow over time. And like all the other stuff that he's involved in, the different charities, the different organizations that he has and everything around racing. I think for someone like him, I along with the generational like wealth, I know in my mind that he will put some of that money towards some good quality like projects, organizations, things like that as well. So
for sure.
So definitely not a bad person to throw that money at. It's still ridiculous money. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even fathom like what that even means. I have no clue.
I don't know what I would do with that much money. But final F1 note. So there were some reports coming out about the top 3 teams with Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, that they were able to find some more engine power by creating some more reliable engines, or I guess like with their engine development, creating reliability has allowed for some more horsepower to be pumped into them. Maybe I guess that would be just like being able to turn the engine up more
Sure.
to be able to, and the engine being able to withstand that for a longer period of
Right.
time. So these rumors that are coming out have said that Ferrari has gained about 30 horsepower, Mercedes 16, and the Red Bull power train about 10 horsepower. So I don't really know what that equates to in terms of lap time, but the fact that without even like just by creating a more durable engine, that these teams with the new regulations have gained some additional speed or additional horsepower, I think is interesting to see, and I wouldn't be shocked to see that kind of start to happen throughout the grid a bit more.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also just over the course of time too, they'll be even developing and iterating on that new package, right? Always just squeezing the juice out of these developmental upgrades and research and development breakthroughs
Yeah.
that their teams are coming up with.
Yep. Always. What is Lewis's thing? Keep pushing. So.
Still we rise.
Still we rise. Who's keep pushing? Is that Max? Oh, if I
I have
just.
no idea.
Um.
Associating like a couple of words with individuals, it gets pretty tough.
I think. I feel like. I'm just gonna say that Lewis has said keep pushing plenty of times. So.
I'm sure he has.
But lots of growth for those teams in terms of the engine. So we'll see how that shakes out this coming year. But I think that's all I had for that long segment of quick hitters for.
Yeah, that was a pretty lengthy quick hitter, man. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I think we may need to come up with a new name. It's not very telling.
long hitters doesn't sound as catchy though, so
You're right.
we'll have to work on that.
We'll workshop that.
Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
any final notes or topics you wanted to touch on?
Nope, I'm all good.
Cool. Well, moving on into League of Legends. For the LPL, I watched a few of the matches from this past week. I didn't get to watch all of them, but did you catch up on any of that? Were there any specific ones that you wanted to talk about or get into at all?
Yeah, I thought BLG versus LGD was really exciting. I looked into NIP versus Ultra Prime, and then I wanted to take a look at the FPX roster against Billy Gaming. So we had a couple of pretty good matchups. What were the matchups that looked good to you?
So I watched the FPX WE match at the start. I watched JDG and Billy Gaming, and then I also caught the RNG versus OMG series. So I didn't get up to the BLG and FPX matchup. So I definitely would want to hear about that. But looking at, I'd say WEFPX matchup was not. It was a pretty good series, but I wouldn't say after watching that I expect either team to necessarily be super high up the standings in terms of their play that I saw. There was some good, but there was a bit of just inconsistencies on both sides. I think that I saw that I think brought up some concerns. There was a good bit of, especially with the bot lane for FPX, when they didn't get ahead, they seemed to really struggle with their decision making and kind of the positions that they were in with the Caitlyn Lux. They have this long range bot lane and everything. But just as a whole, the team got pretty far behind in game one, and they just really weren't able to find the engages and all that they, I think, would have liked to, or the burst that I think you would hope. WE really, their sustain, and it was a similar situation in game three where FPX is trying to throw out as much damage to blow people up right off the bat. But then we're not able to have the sustained damage to actually get the kills, and then just ended up with no cooldowns, kind of losing fights. In game three, using the Kalista ult with the Heimerdinger a lot of times to kind of sacrifice Lele to allow other members of the team to get away. It just seemed like things weren't always on the same page there.
Gotcha. Okay. And now this wasn't the, well, I would say it was similarly the case for FPX against BLG, but that was much later. So yeah, I don't think some of those weaknesses have been shored up. You're right; they did seem a little bit scattered as well. So that's interesting that that was reflected in their first week's game as well.
Yeah, and to talk about BLG, their matchup with JD Gaming was
which was a clerical error on my part. LGD didn't play Billy Gaming yet, yeah. So we're on the same page here. So go ahead.
Yeah, but with that, that was actually a very exciting series.
Yeah.
It was very back and forth, competitive. Seeing the Gwen come out, the Camille, like I'm loving the aggressive top laners that are coming out that are able to compete with the Aatrox and those kind of picks. It's allowed for a lot of variation in that top lane, which I find very exciting. Even though the jungle is pretty kind of set on these these junglers who can get good engage, especially from distance, like with the Vi, with Wukong being able to use his little, I forget his invisibility to engage from a bit further, and then like Sejuani. So that has been pretty standard, I feel like, at least for these LPL matches I was watching. But the top lane variations, the mid lane variations, the bot lane variations, I think has been fun to watch. But those games were just so back and forth. I mean, in game one, Elk had just a number of opportunities that he was able to keep Billy Gaming in the match and potentially turn the tables, but just like the Zeri autos being just a smidge from getting there and hitting their target at a couple of different points. So I was really impressed. I wasn't sure fully what to expect from Elk because he was on Ultra Prime and WE previously, and I don't know if we ever covered any games that he played in. So
I doubt it.
Him coming in, having a good performance. Yagao played very solidly against Knight as well in that matchup. And so like the matchup, I think, was much more competitive than I initially expected. So I was impressed by Billy Gaming in that series against JDG, knowing that JDG is kind of expected to be one of those top teams that we were talking about last week for the LPL. That's kind of our expectation that they'll be up there. So I was and obviously it's early, people are figuring things out, but I was impressed with Billy Gaming's kind of cohesion and the way they were playing throughout that series.
Mhm. Yeah, going back to what you were saying about the like top lane variation, it seems like a lot of the drafts as far as the top lane are being focused around the Kesante pick. And if you're looking to um trade that back for for some other pick, it seems like he's a champion that teams are willing to pick and ban. Um so that'll be interesting as that develops, if teams like really continue to like him, or if he falls out of favor. I think from what we've seen so far, he's just got that good disruption, good team fight potential, kind of singling out a target. He had the Kesante player when Elk was playing Lucian, I believe. Nah, that was probably a different game. But yeah, just Kesante seems pretty good for the team fights. Tough to get a sense of him in the lane. I think I just have to see a little bit more of him. But I guess if teams are picking him, it seems pretty good. So yeah,
Yeah,
I thought the JDG victory over Billy Gaming was really exciting. I agree, it was super fun. Varys Heimerdinger comp fucking winning the day. We got Jason there to poke as well. I think just a really well executed draft comp, or poke comp drafted by JDG for that game 3, and then just executed well.
yeah, and the burst that they were getting from 369 to start fights, it was um, just like their ability to put Billy Gaming immediately like at a disadvantage. I think by poking out at the start of the fights without really using any of their big abilities was really huge for them to be able to, and especially with Shun on the Wukong being able to dodge out of multiple different Sejuani ults throughout the game
Mm-hmm.
and waste that, for JD Gaming to still be able to find opportunities to get poked down and win team fights was impressive, because that was a hard hitting brawl of a match going to almost 48 minutes. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, that was a really exciting series, and I think gonna be indicative of JDG's competitiveness in the early section of the split here.
yeah, and so now that we've talked about, and we can bounce back to the RNG OMG series that I watched. But walk me through what you were seeing from FPX and Billy Gaming, since we've now kind of talked about both of them here with their first matches, since you watched that matchup in day 2 or day 3, I guess it was.
I think primarily what you could say from Billy Gaming is their like early game just seems really strong, or their early to mid game seems really strong. I like the way they're using like dragon pressure and the um I can't think of the other one, the
Rift
Rift
Herald.
Herald
Yeah.
up top, using Rift Herald just to force fights in situations where they know they're advantageous. So I think that's one of the strengths from Billy Gaming. The drafts are pretty interesting. I like how we're just back to the, do you want Lucianami, or do you want like Zeri Yumi, or like Zeri Lulu, or whatever it is, Sivir. Just kind of trading those back and forth. But yeah, I think we're just seeing these like very aggressive comps from both teams. FPX brought out the Cassidin, which I think we're just going to start seeing just like sweep all of the regions,
Mm.
especially if it keeps getting wins as well.
Yeah. Well, and Kara had played that in the series versus WE as well, went 10-1 and
Right,
3 on it. So a
right.
10-1 and 3 and then a 7-0 and 9. That
Yeah,
is pretty wild KDA to start off with Cassidon.
right. So I think what you could say about FPX in this scenario is that they're looking to bring these like really strong, possibly new to meta champions. I was looking at the match history for Cassidy. He's been being picked up a lot more recently. Like in there are some showings where I wouldn't have expected him to be being played. But then bringing him out now is indicative of maybe that bubbling to the surface of the strength of this champion. Billy Gaming was able to come back and take it 2-1, but yeah, that Cassidy looking really disgusting, and I think is indicative of the FPX play style where everybody just wants to go forward and have like kill threat. That was
Yeah.
another really exciting series.
Yeah, FPX, I think that, like I said, I think that they have some cohesion and some like macro maybe decision makings and whatnot that they're struggling with at the moment, or micro too, just in terms of their team fight setup and everything. But I by no means think that they are a bad team. They've played pretty tough matches with their matchup against WE and then against Billy Gaming. So I think as they continue to like develop that team cohesion and kind of figure out their play style a bit more and all, they should be able to hopefully create some better matchups and build on this early season learning, I guess. Even though they didn't end up getting series wins. I do think it's going to be interesting to kind of like you were talking about with the trade back and forth of the Zeri Yumi and the Lucian Nami and just being like, hey, these are our picks. Sticking through those 3 games. It will be interesting to see kind of what happens with that bot lane meta, because we have seen some other picks come out as well, like I had talked about with FPX's first series. There was the Caitlyn Lux. We've seen Kalista in a number of games. We've seen Sivir in a number of games. We've seen Aphelios, Heimerdinger support, Soraka support. So we're seeing a lot of different picks come out in that bot lane as well. The Varus has come out. Ashe has come out as a support. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, kind of like we're watching right now with the top lane being very open. I think maybe we'll develop a bit more of a standard trade bot lane, and maybe it is the Zeri Yumi and Lucian Nami. But I think I love when the meta allows for just a multitude of picks and play styles and things like that to be able to be played. So I think so far I've been excited to see these games early on in the LPL.
Yeah. I've enjoyed them as well. Pretty high level of play, diversity in champs. Seeing the Caitlyn have a home, I think. I don't know if it's like indicative of anything, if it's a marker for a type of play, but I think having Caitlyn in a meta is always really good, where it's not just these 2 carries or 3 carries being played. I always like that option for that long range, very zone control heavy AD, because it's always really fun to watch at the highest level. So it's cool that we see some of the bottom laners picking it up here in LPL.
Yeah, and so also just to bounce back to, like I said, the other matchup I watched of RNG OMG.
Yeah.
I do recommend it. It is not a long series, but it was game 2 was exciting at least. Game 1 was pretty stompy. So I think the main reason I wanted to just quickly talk about that was RNG looks very good out of the gate, kind of as we expected them to, even with the change of mid laner and I believe their support as well with Bunny and Tong Yan coming in. Very, very impressive in game 1. Game 2, they were really just like overextending a bit, not really taking the right fights and whatnot. Ended up being able to get the 2-0 in this series because OMG went for I think it was the Baron that they went for, and ended up getting their backs stopped by RNG while Breathe just went into the base with the Camille and just was deleting inhibitors and turrets and whatnot to end the game. He was
nice.
Consistently split pushing throughout the game to break open turrets and whatnot, but at the end, the RNG team did not really have a winning position and were able to utilize Breathe to end up winning that game and ending it. So that was an exciting game, and like I said, it's about an hour total of League of Legends, so a pretty quick series to watch through in general.
Nice, very cool. And then I see they picked the Viego plus the Graves for their jungler, just for that, just classic aggression out of him.
Oh, yeah.
That we know and love. So yeah, that's going to be a good series to go back and check out. But yeah, I think we had a bunch of good games here from the LPL. LCK kicked off as well. We had a couple of matchups there. Not any that we're going to get into tonight. Just saying that we're kind of in the full swing of it, and we'll see if some of these drafting trends, see what some of the other regions are doing. But right now some of these solutions are looking pretty strong, and the games have been quite exciting so far.
Awesome. I didn't realize that LCK had started, so I'll have to go and check out those matchups.
Well, and that was just a general note as well, just like wrapping in LPL with that as well, not just LCK specifically.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a lot of good League of Legends we'll get to watch. And one note that I just realized is that Damwon Gaming Kia is now D plus Kia. So, and for anyone listening, if we start talking about LCK a bit more, and we're referring to different names, there's your initial alert to keep on your radar, but we'll have more of that as we get into the season. I did want to also just briefly talk about LEC, EMEA, and that region.
Sure.
With just the layout, since they're having a winter season, spring season, and summer season, and shifting that kind of style and layout, they are having 10 teams participate. So there's going to be 10 teams. It's single round robin, best of ones, and the top 8 teams after that will go and play in a group stage and kind of move into more of a playoff style or like world style of bracket with groups and then qualifying. So it will be a bit different watching through that. And of course with that, the LEC EMEA has moved to kind of the prime time for Western League of Legends in terms of scheduling. So they'll have the Saturday, Sunday schedule, where previously they'd been on Thursday, Friday. They're swapping with the LCS for that schedule in terms of the days the games are on. And of course, we'll have LCS then on Thursday, Friday. But there was a little wonkiness with that too. They initially were planning to start the games at 3 p.m. Eastern time. They bumped it back to 5 p.m. Eastern time, so bumped it back from noon Pacific to 2 p.m. Pacific, which still is going to be just like very difficult for a lot of people to watch.
To watch live, yeah. Obviously, people will be able to get their VODs or whatever, but it's just going to further decrease the live viewership, which is an issue. But I think that's another bag of worms that maybe we can get into on another day.
Yeah, I think we'll, but I guess with that shift, it does make a little more sense why they don't need as much hosting from Dash. So
right.
one of the things with
Well, and it may just
Dash.
be a totally different system, like with like less hosting in between,
Yeah,
less Q&A type stuff.
yeah, I would imagine, and it's also I just find it funny how like companies always try to put a positive spin on things. On the LOL Esports like article about LCS moving to Thursdays and Fridays, they talk about how when the LCS debuted, it was a different world back in 2013 and like yada yada yada. And then they did a deep dive that told them that viewership habits and fan expectations have changed, and that LCS viewers consume plenty of content on the weekdays. So of course that means that they're just fine with Thursday and Friday and everything, as opposed to
Of
being
course.
like, just say it. LCS is not a prime time slot because they're not as competitive.
Right.
People want to take their time to watch the more competitive leagues. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
that simple. It's not a big deal. We know that NA has not like performed internationally. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're not out of the loop on that as viewers. So I just find it just as a side note kind of amusing that they're like, well, really, it's just we know that the fans still like watching League on Thursdays and Fridays just as much as Saturdays and Sundays. So we thought that this
Mm-hmm.
shift would not be not like be an issue at all. It's like, well, no, that's not why this is happening, but
I imagine depending on what happens in the coming months here, there may be further changes and further adaptations. This may just be like the tip of an iceberg. Who knows?
yeah, I'm sure. I feel like we've watched changes year to year in terms of are they playing best of ones? Are they playing best of twos? Are they playing best of threes? Are they like and all these different shifts? Oh, like we're gonna have just straight game after game with like a 10-minute music break in between to analyst desk and all this extra like whatever.
Right.
There's been a lot of shifts, so I'm sure this is not the final iteration, but it'll
Right.
be. I'm curious to see, kind of read articles who are actually like doing kind of that background research that I won't be doing on like viewership numbers and how some of that shifts with the LCS to see,
Right.
are numbers staying up? Are they staying the same? How drastically are they falling? Because I do expect them to fall. But I guess we'll get some of that, and I'm curious to see what all comes out as the season
Mm-hmm.
progresses.
Yeah. But yeah, only time will tell. But no reason to massage a dying horse.
No, I have not heard that saying before.
Hopefully, I just came up with that in the moment, and it is as visceral as I hope it is.
Yep, it's yeah. I'll just say yeah.
Nice, very good, very good, very good, sir, very good, sir.
So you have some Magic the Gathering to talk about, right?
Yeah, dude, and yeah, great segue. Sorry for that, just
no, no,
gruesome image.
I thought it would be funny to just transition it that way. So
Definitely. But yeah, no, one interesting thing, like we were talking about last week, but we had a pretty packed show. Didn't want to waste the time. I've been working with the idea of like breaking down some of my commander decks that I built, and it was first brought up by a fan of the show, Buddha. We were talking. The idea was
and
presented to
friend of the
him,
show.
and what just like what that means, why you're doing it, why you should do it, what all the good things are. And immediately I was like pretty resistant to the idea. I was like, oh no, these are like they're all cool. I'm like a fan. And then I was like, all right, but why am I so resistant to it? And that's when I figured like there's probably something there. And so I started giving it some thought and looking at my deck list and was like, what could go? and I was looking over some of the lists and thinking like, yeah, it's not really doing anything interesting. It may be very similar to this thing over here, or maybe I never played it. Like I built it, but never got a chance to play it. Nor did I believe that I ever would, kind of thing. Maybe I just like maybe it was a deck that was less about being played and more just like, oh, I just want to put 100 cards together. I like thinking about the idea and whatever, and just like, completing it, sleeving it up, whatever. All right, cool, done. So thinking about it, I was like, okay, all right, there may be something to this. So one weekend I was able to, I think it ended up being like 5 or 6 commander decks, and then a bunch of the like 75 card lists that I have. Some of them were like, like this isn't really that interesting. I can use some of these cards like for a sideboard here. And so it just became this whole thing of like, all right, well, I don't care about these. What are like the prime cards that I get out of it? Thinking like, oh, some of this is just like chaff. It's not even that interesting or good or whatever. So there's been a large process of, breaking them all down, unsleeving them, organizing, putting them in different places. So it's just been like this whole process, but I've really, really enjoyed it. And there was something about like being resistant to it at first that made me realize like, okay, so maybe there's something here. And going through and kind of making a case for each of my commander decks was like pretty interesting. Like deciding if these children were worth keeping around or if they were going to be murdered.
Brutal.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, it was crazy.
So have you built any new decks that you are like excited about yet, or are you still in that process of like shifting and finding like the best places? I mean, obviously I'm sure you are in general still in that, but have you gotten any full decks rebuilt as of yet for that?
Yeah, so one of the things I was able to do is the mono green list that I had. The commander, his name is Yorvo, and it's just like very simply putting +1/+1 counters on big things, growing those things, and just smashing face. And previously, I think the deck was really boring. It had just like really, really bad cards that likely wouldn't be commander playable. They were in the sets that they were printed in for like the limited environment or the constructed environment, not necessarily for like 100 card constructed.
Gotcha.
So I was able to take a bunch of those out, and then so you're left with like a decent shell of the original deck, but then you have all of these green cards from the 5 or 6 other deck lists that you just took apart. So like, okay, so now I have access to some better ramp cards. Now I have access to some better card draw. Oh, here's like 2 or 3 pieces of removal that weren't in there before. And so it's fun to like delete the deck list, unsleeve it, take it all apart, and then like rebuild it with like a better, like cleaner mind about the idea and like a little more of a selection of cards to pick from than when I had originally thought about the idea. Like I only had these cards to put in it, so like I was scrounging for like, okay, like I need at least like a couple of card draw spells, but now I could rebuild the deck as though I had the full possibilities at my disposal.
Nice.
So that was really fun, is like getting to look at my mono green list and say like, all right, we're really just going to like change this up, take out all these bad cards and just like focus up the idea significantly. And that was really cool. I was also able to do that with my mono white list that I have. That's like was kind of uninteresting just because mono white is really tough to build, but I got access to like it was like 6 or 7 like heater cards that were in other decks, but I never would have just like taken out, right? Because these cards were already spread so thin, and that was an element of it too, is like there were like 1 or 2 really, really powerful cards in each of the decks, and may have been the reason I put it together in the first place. And it's like, they likely just have a better home somewhere.
Well, and that makes
Go
sense
ahead.
too, though, because if you like, so my curiosity is, do you feel like you figured out why you're so resistant to like doing it in the first place?
Yeah, because I thought like you fall in love with your own ideas, right? Like you think, well, I had this idea, I put the work in for it. So, and part of it is like the sunk cost fallacy is like, well, I put the time in, like
That
maybe I'll play it.
that's my
At least it's
biggest
here.
thing is I was imagining it's like that's kind of what I would have imagined is like
Yep.
I took the time, I found a home for this, I put the deck together, I like thought through this, and now I'm just gonna tear down my little village that I built. Like,
Right. That's
why the
tough.
fuck would I do that? To spend more time. But I think like recognizing that that yeah, like these cards, they are heavy hitters in their individual decks, but if you put them in the same deck, then like, oh damn, like they can do some damage.
Right, right. And now it's something. And now it's like a little more interesting. And now it's something like it almost becomes something entirely new with just being able to slot in like 10 to 11 new cards. And another thing I was able to do is like you gain access to a whole bunch of sleeves. So I was able to just like look at a bunch of sleeves I had and say like I've been playing with these for forever. I just threw them out. They have like this weird like tonguing that happens on the top where like you've taken cards out a couple of times, so it's kind of like it's
Open.
weird at the top. Yeah. So you can just get rid of them. And so these decks that previously were in maybe like older sleeves, I put them in new cleaner sleeves that like are pretty just purchased, so you refreshen them, kind of give them new life. And this whole like it's all been just like this really beautiful thing. And the just full on just getting to like delete deck lists out of the thing was like, well, that was cool. And yeah, it's been interesting. So I have to give a lot of credit where it's due to Buddha for introducing me to the idea, and then you know the creative freedom, because I was talking with him about one of the decks that he did it with, and it was just super fun. So I've really enjoyed it. And the brewing never stops. Obviously, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and I think like another idea that a lot of people struggle with is like the if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But
Hmm.
just because something isn't broken doesn't mean that it can't be better.
Exactly.
Like if if I back in high school I fractured my ankle during a track practice. I rolled it. It ended up being fractured. But if I was just like, well, it's just a fracture, it isn't broken, and just kept running on it, then I would have just fucked myself up. Like sometimes it is better to still fix things that are not entirely broken. And so
Hmm.
it's cool that you went back through and have started that process of building something out of the pieces. So
Yeah, yeah, it's been really neat. So that's been the great deck breakdown. Let's get these people out of here, Aaron. Give me your flavor of the week here.
sounds good. So for my music, not super interesting, but I've been just in a much more like chill music mood lately, and I feel like some of my music interests maybe have shifted a bit more to some of this like indie chiller kind of music. I still do love my Kendrick and J. Cole and like all the different artists that I love in the rap genre as well, but I've just found myself with my casual listening hours listening a bit more to just some of this like chiller indie interesting storytelling songs or
Okay.
cool lyricism and whatnot. So that is my music for this week. For my food, Colleen and I went to a restaurant for Restaurant Week called Positano Coast in Philadelphia. We had been there for my friend Jess and John's wedding, who were the ones who was the reverend for their wedding.
Yep.
So we had been there for their rehearsal dinner, and the food was great when we were there for that. So we were like, hey, let's give it a shot. I had some oysters, some mussels, and a truffle mushroom pasta for my main entree. It was slapped, and Restaurant Week in Philly is a great deal. You get basically a ton of restaurants opt into it, and they do $40 3-course menus, so you get an entree, appetizer, entree, and dessert for $40.
That's cool.
You can add on other things, like the oysters we had were just like, we like oysters, so we
Sure.
just added them on. So it's definitely a cool way that we've enjoyed checking out restaurants that maybe are typically a little more expensive or whatnot, that we can take those opportunities to try some food and find places that we enjoy.
Yeah, it's really neat.
So that was solid. And then for my visual medium, we are almost all the way through season 2 of Ted Lasso on Apple TV, which is been a really fun show. It's got a good mix of drama and sports. It's about I forget if I had talked about it previously, but for those who don't know, it is a show about an American football coach, college coach, who gets hired on to be a coach of an English Premier League soccer team, European football team. And kind of him figuring it out. So between the drama and life and those things that are like interesting, kind of like suck you in, plus the sports aspect of it, I've really enjoyed it and have found it very bingeable. The episodes are also not super long or anything. They're like, I think like half-hour episodes. So
Nice.
I've been enjoying that, and I'm looking forward to getting to the end of this season, which is currently where everything is up to in terms of new episodes. So,
Okay, gotcha.
but yeah, that is my flavor of the week.
Nice. Now I'll start off where you finished. Me and Sarah very recently finished our watch through of Game of Thrones, and interestingly, well, probably not interesting. I don't think I would add any. I don't think I would add anything interesting to the conversation about, like, the lead up to the final season, and then everything that season 8 was.
Had you
overall
you hadn't watched it before, right?
I'd never watched it before, not even
Okay.
really like having seen even like clips of it or whatever. If I remember correctly, I may have watched probably 2 or 3 episodes of season 1 a couple of years back. It was just like, maybe I'll go back to this. But yeah, overall, this was like a fresh watch through.
Nice.
I think overall pretty resistant to a lot of the stuff. Like, what should I say? I think it was like relatively enjoyable, but some of the drawbacks were like significant drawbacks. Like the sexual violence just like makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like to the point that it is, just for having it there, it can only hit so high to me.
Gotcha.
Same thing with, like, at a certain point, I think it's excessive violence. I understand the time period, but maybe there's like a way that you can imply some violence more than just like whatever. And those are just stylistic choices that's more of like a personal preference type thing.
Yeah.
So whatever. This isn't a treatise or anything, but overall, I think I enjoy. What I'm trying to get at is, I think I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. But yeah, overall, I now see what people mean about it as like the overall thing. And yeah, I can really see, because even as someone who was like half invested, I was disappointed by the end for probably all the same reasons that, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
people originally
just
were.
tons of plot holes, and like I think overall, I mean, for someone who it doesn't sound like it's quite your style of like, I'm did you enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies?
Love them.
Yeah.
The
So
Witcher season 1, love that.
you love, like, you love that fantasy, like you love that, and obviously with the Magic the Gathering and all too, like you love that
I'm
fantasy
super down for
element,
fantasy,
like
yeah.
it's really cool, and I love it too. But I can understand where the in Lord of the Rings you don't see a lot of the violence, or a lot of it is against magical or mythical kind of beings and all, and so it's kind of
Yeah.
slightly less real in a sense when
Yeah,
you
for sure.
see an orc get killed versus like a person. Like there's
hmm
like a difference probably in the way that brains like feel about that. And
Mm.
so um yeah, like for someone who it maybe wasn't quite your cup of tea, but it was in your vein, like I'm sure you could recognize like the different issues that people had pretty easily, because it's like a compelling story that just unfortunately like did not get tied together, or some storylines did not get resolved the way they should, like whether not even the endings that people want or not, but like just didn't get resolved in a
Right.
proper way.
Right. Obviously, like, you know, the rushing component and this and that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
so just like overall happy like that I did it. Now I know, now I can have my own opinion on the thing.
yeah.
But yeah, definitely many jokes to come for that. My food here for the week is less about a meal and more about a conversation that me and Sarah had about just like how we've kind of come together and learned about eating. We've been together for a while. We've been living together for a while, and we had a conversation where we were kind of like looking back on some of our eating habits, some of our buying habits, some of the things that we did, some of the things that we did like not so well. And that was just really interesting, kind of to see how far we've come, see how our diet has changed, and took a little look into the future of like kind of what we plan to be doing, and what kind of things we want to continue. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see. Something as simple as like food intake really does change, and you can like improve and learn upon it, or
Definitely.
you can learn about it and improve upon it. So that was pretty cool. And
Nice.
then my music slash interesting here for the week, I had been doing deep dives on like chess and poker, game theory,
Hmm.
and like the incorporation of AI into the basically like the education side of these games that are played at like a high competitive level for money. Recently, AI has come in as a training tool, as a solving tool, and hearing about the ways these players think about that, and like what game theory is to them, like thinking about game theory optimal plays. And one of the new concepts that I'd learned about is this thing called the Nash equilibrium,
Okay.
where if both players are playing like quote unquote perfectly in any given scenario, you're at Nash equilibrium. So both players, for the most part, are trying to achieve that Nash equilibrium in their play to be as unexploitable as possible.
Hmm. That makes sense.
and and then therein the metagame kind of shifts as players make creative choices and this and that. And obviously there are people who understand this concept way better than I do. It's very new to me. But just learning about all these things and taking a deep dive where I'm thinking of my own play in various games. I'm thinking of Hunt, Magic the Gathering, things like this, thinking of like what am I doing as a player that could be different, hearing about like game theory optimal, and thinking about it from that like very like 1 and 0 binary type, like computer esque perspective has been like really useful and interesting to me. So that's kind of my new idea for the week here.
I'm curious how, and it just as we wrap up here, but I'm curious how that would potentially play out as it gets used more and whatnot in things like poker and chess, because
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes sense more so in chess than in poker.
Mm-hmm.
Just in my mind, because in chess, like it's much easier to find what the optimal way to play is, and I think like using that AI, maybe not just like for the human brain, but to like think multiple moves ahead and like, oh, if I do this, well, what are my options for my next move, and what
Mm-hmm.
would they do, and this and that. Whereas poker, I feel like it would be a lot harder for that to be as valuable, because poker, you have such a human part to it, and you do obviously in chess too, in terms of play styles and things like that. But poker,
Mm-hmm.
with bluffing, being able to read the opponents, with like all the additional like unknowns, like chess is a very like
Mm-hmm.
it's a visible board state. Poker, it's not. You don't know what cards each other person has. You don't. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot more unknown for AI to try and find an optimal way. And with that, the human aspect comes into poker a lot more. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how, like, what they've found in terms of the, like, obviously it can give you, like, oh, should I hold or fold kind of initial best recommendations. But um, outside of that, I feel like there's a lot more holes that it would have to fill for a game like poker. So that's interesting that it's being used there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the programs look like specifically, but just just hearing about it from from that perspective was interesting. But how they work specifically and what kind of output they're giving you and
Right.
what kind of input is available, I don't exactly know. But the fact that AI is being incorporated into some of these games, in and of itself, is just kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, and like I guess part of the reason I'm thinking on the way I am is I was watching a video on Twitter the other day of, it was like a professional poker player and like a bunch of other like kind of random people playing in a high stakes poker game, whether it was celebrities or whatnot, and Mr. Beast was one of them, and
Okay.
he bluffed. He had nothing, like his hand sucked, and
Hmm.
he just kept like betting and playing and whatever, and just got a lucky final, uh I guess it's the river card or
Yeah,
whatever,
I believe so.
whatever the final draw was, that won him the hand against this professional poker player. And the
Yeah.
poker player's like, it's like no one would have played that hand in real poker, because no one, like Mr. Beast obviously has like ridiculous amounts of money. So
Right.
the guy was like, it's like impossible to play poker against someone who doesn't care whether they win or lose their money. Like
Yeah,
this guy,
exactly.
like he was playing so poorly. It's like when you're playing in low elo of League of Legends and you're like,
Right.
my skill
Right.
shot was at the right angle, but the guy just didn't dodge because he sucks so bad. He didn't dodge
Right.
into my shot like he was supposed to. It was
And
the
but
same
it
kind of
and it's
concept.
actually big brain because they're so bad.
It's like you have to play differently against people who are
Yep.
like not good, because they just don't know the right way to play. So that's why I'm kind of curious, but I digress. We'll maybe you'll learn some more and get to share with us down the line,
I hope
because that
so.
does sound pretty interesting. But that, of course, does bring us to the end of this week's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming back week after week to hear me ramble on, and Justin put out interesting topics for us to discuss. But we really appreciate it, and appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. So thank you.
Tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. Find us on Spotify, Google, and YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter at Tall and Short of One. You guys know the deal. We appreciate you listening so much. Thank you so much for continuing to listen in 2023. And we'll see you next week. Peace out.
Adios.